The night Fern Lacey was screamed at in front of 40 people, she had already been on her feet for 11 hours. That is the detail that gets left out of stories like this. Not the screaming, people remember the screaming. What they forget is everything that came before it. The double shift she picked up when another nurse called in sick at noon. The pediatric patient she'd spent 20 minutes calming down with a glove balloon and a terrible knock-knock joke before his IV placement. The family she'd sat with at 4 p.m. in the consultation hallway, holding a mother's hand while a doctor delivered the kind of news that rearranges a person's life into before and after. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, Fern's sneakers had squeaked on the same linoleum tiles approximately 10,000 times, and she'd had nothing to eat since a granola bar at 2 in the afternoon. None of that would matter to Kyle Oram. She noticed him the way you notice weather. Not immediately, but with a growing sense that conditions were changing. He'd been in the department lobby since 6, a man in his mid-30s with a navy blue sport coat that probably cost more than Fern's rent, and the particular posture of someone who considered waiting to be something that happened to other people. He was a pharmaceutical sales representative, there to meet with the department chief about a new cardiac medication. She knew this because he had already told the front desk coordinator twice, and once more to the charge nurse, each time with slightly less patience than the last. When she passed through the lobby, on her way to pull a supply cart, he stepped forward. "Excuse me." His voice had the texture of a man accustomed to being accommodated. "How much longer is this going to take? I had a 6 o'clock appointment." "Dr. Ellison is with a patient," Fern said. She kept walking. She had to keep moving. There was always somewhere to be, and offered the answer over her shoulder, professionally, without slowing. "He'll be with you when he's able." She heard the shift before she turned around. A quality in the silence behind her that was different from irritation. A held-breath tension, like a room when someone knocks something off a shelf and everyone waits to see how badly it breaks. "That's not acceptable," Kyle Oram said. She turned. He had followed her into the center of the lobby. "I've been sitting here for an hour," he said, louder now, loud enough that the rows of waiting patients could hear clearly. A woman with 2 small children looked up from her phone. An elderly man in a compression sleeve lowered his magazine. A teenage boy, scrolling through something on a screen, lifted his eyes. "I scheduled this meeting weeks ago. I have other appointments tonight. And nobody in this place seems to have the remotest idea what they're doing. Sir, I understand you're frustrated. Don't do that." He cut her off with a short, contemptuous sound. "Don't give me the script. You people use that same line every time like it means something. You don't understand anything. You don't even look old enough to be working here. What are you, 22? You look like you just walked in from a school project." Around the lobby, nobody moved. Fern could feel it, that charged stillness of a public space in which everyone had just collectively decided to become invisible. The charge nurse at the desk, Becca Ware, had gone very still with a clipboard in her hands. 2 other nurses at the corridor entrance had stopped mid-conversation and were watching. Fern kept her voice level. "If you'd like to reschedule. I want to speak to someone who can actually help me." He stepped closer. "Not a girl playing dress-up in scrubs. Is there anyone in this building with actual authority? Or is this whole department run by people who got their certifications from the internet?" There were audible intakes of breath around the room. Fern Lacey was 5 feet 4 inches tall. She had soft brown hair pulled back in a utilitarian ponytail, a face that people routinely described as sweet in the way they meant harmless, and a voice that had never in 7 years of nursing raised itself to match the volume of a difficult patient or their difficult family member. She believed, with the practical certainty of someone who had watched it work 1,000 times, that calm was more powerful than noise. But she also had a body that was simply tired, 11 hours tired, granola bar tired, a mother who might be dying tired. "I'm going to ask you one more time, sir," she said. "Please lower your voice. There are patients here who—" "I will not lower my voice," he said, and now there was something ugly in it, stripped of the professional veneer, just mean in the way that certain men become mean when no one of sufficient status is watching. "I'll lower my voice when someone in this department shows me the basic competence to do their job. This is a joke. You are a joke. If I ran my business the way you people run this floor, I'd be bankrupt inside a month. He had more to say. She could see it in him. The way the words were lined up behind his teeth, more personal than professional now, the kind of words a person reaches for when they want to diminish rather than complain. Her jaw tightened. She kept her eyes steady. And then, from the far corner of the waiting room, someone stood up. She didn't notice him at first. Most people hadn't. He'd been there for a while, seated in one of the plastic chairs along the east wall, a man in a plain gray t-shirt and dark cargo pants, with the kind of build that was less about size and more about density, the kind that suggested a long and specific history with difficult physical requirements. He was perhaps 35. He had close-cropped hair and the quiet face of someone who had learned, likely through experience, to conserve expression. There was a medical compression wrap on his right forearm. Beside him on the floor was a Belgian Malinois. The dog was wearing a black working vest with a small patch on the side that read military working dog. It was not a pet. Anyone who looked at the animal for more than 2 seconds understood this. Not because it was aggressive, but because of its precise, deliberate stillness. It sat at the man's left knee with the alert posture of something trained to be ready, watching the lobby with amber eyes that moved without any sign of agitation. Every motion in the room registered. Nothing caused a reaction. The man crossed the lobby without hurrying. Kyle Oram was in the middle of something. Whatever sentence he'd been winding up to, Fern had stopped tracking it when he noticed the approach. "Can I help you?" Kyle's tone landed somewhere between irritation and challenge. "No," the man said. His voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. "But I think you're done here." "Excuse me?" Kyle turned fully to face him. The Malinois had come to stand at the man's left side and sat when the man stopped walking, amber eyes fixing on Kyle with that same undisturbed attention. "I don't know who you are, but this is a private conversation. There are 40 people listening to it, so that's probably not the right word." The man glanced once at Fern, then back to Kyle. "You should apologize." "I should." Kyle made a short, disbelieving sound. "Who do you think you are?" "Dean Radner." He said it the way people say their name when they're not interested in impressing anyone. "Master Chief Petty Officer, SEAL Team 7, Naval Special Warfare Command, active duty." A beat. "And I've been sitting in that chair for the last 40 minutes because this nurse over here was the one who got me checked in and told me it'd be a wait, and she apologized to me for the wait, which she did not have to do." Kyle looked him over, the gray shirt, the cargo pants, the compression wrap. "You don't have any ID on you. You could be anyone." "I could," Dean agreed, "but I'm not, and Scout here's been on 2 combat deployments, so he's not nobody either." The dog, at the sound of its name, did not move, but its gaze shifted briefly to its handler and then returned to Kyle. Now, the nurse. Kyle's jaw worked. Something was shifting behind his eyes, a calculation happening in real time, the internal math of a man trying to determine whether this was a situation he could still win. She was unhelpful. "She told you the doctor was with a patient," Dean said. "I heard it. Everyone in this room heard it. The way she spoke to me was professional. What you were doing was not." Dean glanced around the lobby once, briefly. The families, the patients, the children, the elderly man with the magazine still lowered in his lap, and then back to Kyle. There was no heat in his voice, no performance. He sounded the way a particular type of person sounds when they've already decided what's going to happen and are simply waiting for the other party to catch up. "I'm going to give you an opportunity right now. You're going to apologize to Nurse Lacey, and you're going to sit back down, or you're going to leave. Those are the choices that are available to you." "You can't make me do anything," Kyle said. But something had dropped out of his voice. The ugly confidence was still there, wrapped in something thinner now. "You're right," Dean said. "I can't make you do anything." He waited. Scout's amber eyes had not moved from Kyle. The silence lasted perhaps 8 seconds. To Fern, standing 3 feet away with her hands folded at her waist and her pulse doing something complicated in her throat, it felt much longer. Kyle Oram looked at Fern. "I may have," he started and stopped. Tried again. The wait was frustrating. He stopped again. "Full sentence," Dean said quietly. "She deserves a full sentence." The room was absolutely still. "I'm sorry," Kyle said. The words came out clipped and graceless, but they came out. For the way I spoke to you. Fern nodded once. Thank you, she said, because she was a professional, and because she meant it, and because she was not interested in punishment. She never had been. What she wanted was simply for it to stop, and it had stopped. Kyle Oram straightened his sport coat, looked once more at Dean with an expression that was trying to be contempt and landing somewhere closer to chastened, and then walked back to his chair without saying anything else. Becca at the front desk cleared her throat softly. The lobby gently resumed. Someone's phone buzzed. The children went back to their tablet. The old man with the magazine turned a page. Fern exhaled through her nose. She turned to Dean Radner, who was already moving back toward his chair in the east corner. Thank you, she said. He glanced back. You didn't need the help. I know, she paused, but it was still, thank you. He nodded and sat down. Scout folded itself back to the floor at his knee with the fluid economy of a well-trained animal. Fern watched them for a moment, the man with the compression wrap on his forearm and the dog in the working vest, and then turned back to her work, because there was always work. She had 3 more hours on her shift. She did not think about Kyle Oram again. What she thought about in the spare fragments between patients was the dog, the careful way it had watched without threatening, the specific discipline of it, not aggression leashed but attention directed. She'd grown up around dogs, labs, mixed breeds, nothing like that. It was 9:20 when she finally caught a 10-minute break and stepped into the break room to pour herself something hot. The coffee was terrible. It was always terrible after 6, when the fresh pot had long since cooked down to something approaching asphalt. But it was hot, and it was there, and she wrapped both hands around the mug and let herself be still for a moment. Becca came in 2 minutes later. You okay? Fine, Fern said. You sure? Because that was. Becca. Fern looked at her. I'm fine, really. She meant it. She was tired in the way that had become her baseline, and there was a faint residual heat in her chest that was less anger than something she didn't have precise language for. The particular tiredness of being made small by someone who should have known better. But she was fine. She'd been fine through harder things than that. The guy with the dog, Becca said, lowering her voice with the conspiratorial pleasure of someone who had information. I looked up the name when he checked in, Dean Radner. He's here visiting one of the trauma residents. Apparently they serve together. He comes in a couple times a year. The dog's name is Scout. She said it like she was reporting something significant. Belgian Malinois, fully certified military working dog, active duty. She paused. That's like a real thing. That's not a pet. I gathered that, Fern said, and Becca laughed, and the break room felt a little warmer, and then Fern's pager went off, and she set down the coffee and went back to work. She was at the medication station at 10:30 when she heard the footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting Becca or one of the residents. It was Dean Radner. Scout walked beside him. The lobby she could see past his shoulder was thinning now, visiting hours long over, only the genuine emergencies and their families left in clusters of 2 and 3. Ready to leave, he said, but I wanted to. He stopped. Started again in the way of someone who is not often in the habit of explaining himself. I wanted to tell you something. Fern set down the chart she was holding. Okay. 3 years ago, October, you were working the night shift. She waited. There was a woman who came in at about 2 in the morning, mid-40s. She'd been brought in by her husband because she was having chest tightness and he was worried. The attending physician saw her, ran the initial workup, told her it was anxiety, and referred her to her primary care for follow-up. He paused. You were the nurse on the floor. You came in to do her discharge paperwork, and you noticed something. Her oxygen saturation was slightly off, her respiratory rate. Something about the presentation didn't sit right with you. Fern was very still. You went back to the attending. He'd already moved on. You pushed. He pushed back. Dean's voice didn't change. It stayed level, factual, the way he'd spoken in the lobby. You ordered a CT pulmonary angiography. You documented the clinical reasoning. You made him look. A pulmonary embolism. The memory surfaced slowly, not because it was faint, but because she'd had so many similar ones. Those middle-of-the-night moments of doubt, The ones where she stood in a hallway and stared at a chart and thought, am I seeing something or am I seeing nothing? And then decided she would rather be wrong and push than be right and say nothing. She'd been wrong 3 times. She'd been right twice. This had been one of the twice. Bilateral, she said quietly, both lungs. Bilateral, he confirmed. She coded 20 minutes after the CT. They got her to the OR in time. He looked at her steadily. That was my sister, Nurse Lacey, Joanna File. She was 43 years old and she had 2 daughters. The youngest just turned 8 last month. The medication station was very quiet. Scout sat at Dean's knee and watched Fern with its amber eyes, the same unhurried attention it had brought to the lobby earlier, and she thought distantly that there was something equalizing about an animal that offered no judgment, just observation. I didn't know, she started. I know you didn't. He wasn't accusing her. You probably don't remember the case specifically. I'm guessing there have been 100 like it. I remember the embolism, she said. I remember the chart. I didn't. She shook her head. I didn't know her name until just now. He nodded slowly. I came back to this hospital a few weeks after she was discharged. I wanted to find whoever it was on that shift. The attending tried to take credit, politely. You know how it's done, but the records were there. And the floor nurse who'd been with Joanna that night had documented everything. Every observation, every time she'd raised the concern. He paused. I read the notes, all of them. Fern thought about those notes. She could see them in her memory, the way she could see all the charts that had mattered. Not the words exactly, but the quality of the attention she'd brought to them. The need to write down everything she'd seen, because if something happened, if she'd been wrong, she wanted the record to show that she had not been careless. And if she'd been right, she wanted the record to show that too, not for credit, but because another nurse might one day face the same situation and need to know what to look for. I asked to speak with hospital administration, Dean said. I wrote a letter, a formal one, commending the nursing staff on that shift, specifically you. I don't know if it ever went anywhere. Letters like that, she started. Get filed, he said. I know. I'm not telling you because I think you owe me something. I'm telling you because... He paused for the first time with something that wasn't quite awkwardness, but was the closest she'd seen from him to uncertainty. Because I sat in that chair for 40 minutes tonight and watched you manage 12 different things at once without once making anyone feel like an inconvenience, and then someone talked to you like you were nothing. And I wanted you to know. Whatever else happened tonight, you are not nothing. You have never been nothing. My sister has been going to her daughter's soccer games for 3 years because of you. Fern was quiet for a moment. The break room noise filtered down the hall. Someone's monitor beeped twice and then settled. How is she? Fern asked. Joanna. The corner of his mouth moved. Not quite a smile, or maybe exactly a smile, just a very contained one. She's stubborn, he said. Drives her cardiologist insane, takes the stairs everywhere, refuses to slow down. She calls me every Sunday whether I'm stateside or not. He looked at Scout, then back at Fern. She's going to her youngest's birthday party on Saturday. She makes these layer cakes. They're terrible. The frosting is always lopsided, and the layers never align, and she sends photos every time, like she's showing me a masterpiece. That sounds like a masterpiece, Fern said. Yeah, he said. It does. Scout rose from sitting, sensing the shift in the conversation the way working dogs do, not the words, but the completion of something. Dean clipped the lead and gathered himself to go. The man who spoke to you tonight, Dean said, I got his business card off the desk when I came in to check in. I know the hospital director. Not well. Enough. He paused. I'll be making a call tomorrow morning. You don't have to do anything, and you don't have to know about it, but I thought you should know. You don't have to. I know I don't, he said. That's generally when things are worth doing. He was at the corridor entrance when she called after him. Master Chief Radner. He turned. Tell your sister, Fern said, that I want a photo of the next cake. Something crossed his face, warm and brief and entirely unguarded, there and then gone the way a light goes when someone closes a door in another room, the glow fading back to the level shape of him. He nodded once. She watched him and Scout move through the thinning lobby, past the rows of chairs, past the front desk, where Becca glanced up and then watched them go, past the sliding glass doors that exhaled open into the cool October night. Then she turned back to her station. The chart was still there, the medication list, the 3 patients she needed to circle back to before handoff. The endless forward motion of the work, which was what she had chosen, and what she would keep choosing, because this was what she knew, that somewhere out there, in a city she might never visit, a woman was taking the stairs and sending lopsided cake photographs and going to soccer games on Tuesday evenings, and that the thread between that woman's life and this particular Tuesday night in this particular hospital corridor was made of nothing more and nothing less than the act of paying attention. Fern Lacey picked up the chart. She went back to work.